And just want to give you a minute to hear some reflections on a cabinet meeting we just had. It was fantastic to see the team gathered in person and to give you also some updates on the unfolding storm that is about to seize almost the entire state of New York. So we'll first talk about that in a minute. But before that, earlier this morning, I had a chance to receive the torch from the World University Games as it makes its journey all the way up to Lake Placid. We are so excited that our efforts to secure this incredible international sporting event was successful. I had a chance to travel up to Lake Placid as Lieutenant Governor. Back in 2018, we were almost locked in a room in a hotel with some people from Russia and Siberia and France, who were the ones who were going to be determining which community was able to receive and welcome the 2023 World University Games. And Betty Little was with me. I remember Senator Little and I were in the room, and we said, we're not going to feed anybody until the answer is yes. So we were aggressive in our approach, and today I was able to join the state employees who participated in the relay run, and to thank everybody and get the energy, excitement around what's going to happen in our state in 28 days or so, but it's going to be on the 12th of January all the way through the 22nd. So we'll be the home of the next World University Games. I want to make sure that we get that message out there. People should start making their travel plans. We believe that this is going to have a major impact of about $240 million on our economy. The athletes and all the participants, spectators, media coverage, it's going to be covered by ESPN, will be coming through Albany, our airport right here. So this is going to help. We've got all these local teams ready to welcome people. So get ready. I can't wait to get up there. But before I get to the cabinet update, got one more, hopefully our last winter storm of this incredible season. It has been one for the record books. As someone who lived and breathed and experienced from November 17th to the 20th, that was historic in many respects. It wasn't just historic for Western New York, it was historic for the state. It was the record amount of snow New York State ever received in a 24-hour period. So we lived through that. I have an incredible team here. They all survived the experience. We were camped out for 5 days trying to respond in Buffalo and Western New York. What happened, my hometown was slammed. Buffalo Bills, a lot of drama back then about will the Bills be able to get out and get to the game that got moved. So we were intensely involved. And the point being is that we are experienced. I was experienced before, but that was next level. So we really, having 6 inches of snow per hour, think about that. We had over 80 inches of snow. We had 6 feet of snow up in Watertown. And so that was one for the ages. So, but we were prepared. We knew what we were doing. And I think that gives a lot of people comfort to know when you have the best team assembled in the entire country to respond to winter events, storm events, any kind of storm, sitting right here with Catherine Garcia, Jackie Bray, and everyone else who's so involved in this, head of the DOT, all those roads that were getting cleared, Marie-Therese Dominguez. So as someone from Buffalo, I'm not a stranger to this. Upstate, we're not a stranger to this, but it's all about repositioning everything, all your resources, getting them on the ground before you end up in a difficult situation. We're already bringing individuals from Long Island up, and also coordinating the roads, keeping people off early. I think that's what saved lives in Western New York. Our decision, and some question it at the moment, already saying that we want trucks off the thruway and having travel bans in place early because you have to be ready to handle the worst case scenario. So we're starting to see snow this afternoon through Saturday. Heaviest will hit this afternoon, but different areas of the state will be affected, as you can see. 12 inches in central New York, 18 inches of snow, perhaps up in the snow country. They're welcoming it. They want it there, but it's going to hit during the commuting area. And that's going to be tough. Our peak is going to be about 1 to 2 inches per hour Thursday night through Friday, wintry mix, but it's going to be, again, a statewide effect. What's concerning are the winds. This is something we are spared in Western New York. We just had incredible volume of snow coming down, and you couldn't keep up with it. It was almost impossible to keep the roads clear, but they did. But when you have the wind event coupled with this, whether it's the rain downstate or snow upstate, that's when you have the vulnerable situation where power lines can come down. And power lines come down, it's a danger to human life. People are on the roads, as well as shutting down power. And when it's this bitter cold, the scariest thing for a mom with little kids, as happened to me, is to be sitting there with no heat in your house in the middle of winter. So we're watching for that. We've, again, have utility crews all set, already on the ground, ready to respond as quickly as possible. So we also have a lake effect snow event, separate from this one. That'll be 1 to 2 feet of snow off of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And so we'll be sharing more information on that. But we were successful last time because people got off the roads, the plows did their jobs, and we were back to normal within an incredibly fast amount of time. So we just want to make sure people heed all of our warnings. And again, having people ready, because we have all the plows, tow trucks, loaders, snow blowers. We got plenty of gas, plenty of fuel. We got plenty of salt. We are ready to respond. Up to 6,500 utility workers, which really are become frontline workers when you're desperately trying to get the heat back on in the house. So we'll be ready for this. New York is ready, as we always are, but we're ready. Bring it on. Mother Nature, just keep at it. I started my first week on the job with a hurricane, and closing out this year with another winter storm. But it's nothing we can't handle, right, team? All right, that's what I like to hear. Let me transition over to the cabinet meeting that we just held, and I want to thank my team for their hard work. We had Karen Keogh, Secretary of the Governor, Liz Fine, Counsel of the Governor, Stacy Lynch, our Chief of Staff, Catherine Garcia, who I introduced, Director of State Operations, Robin Chappelle Golston, Executive Deputy Secretary, and of course, someone you know very well is Robert Mojica. We talked about our love of Robert, our appreciation for Robert. Michael Lasher, Policy Director Julie Wood gave a report as well, and also our Lieutenant Governor, who I'll be speaking about in a couple minutes. But this first 16 months was fast and furious. We had a bold, ambitious agenda to help better the lives of New Yorkers. And we talked about, during the cabinet meeting, our reflection on what we had already accomplished, and it's phenomenal when you think about the short time where you have to build a government where there was none. We had to create a cabinet, we had to create a senior team, but also then get through a lot of hurdles at the time. But I wanted them to be proud of what they had done with, again, the hurricane relief, the rent relief, getting that out the door in the first few days of our administration, which had been jammed up for months, and people were really, really desperately hurting and in fear of losing their homes. And at the same time, as I mentioned, building historically the most diverse administration in our state's history, worrying about whether or not our kids are going to get back to school because of the COVID situation, but then Omicron came, so we got through all that. And then we had to put together our State of the State, something I'm laser focused on and have been for many months, starting last summer, putting together, again, how you build on the agenda that you already put forth last year, the unfinished business, but the new bold vision for taking us into the next year. So we did that. We also had to deal with lowering our costs for residents, suspending the gas tax. We also gave a historic amount of money back in tax rebates to people, property owners, middle-class tax cuts we expedited. So we were very conscious of how, during our budget process, we could put more money back in the pockets of New Yorkers. Record funding to schools had multiple effects. It was positive, it needed to happen, but also gave the opportunity for school districts that manage their money well to literally cut their own taxes or not increase their own taxes because of the support from us. And we had to rebuild a healthcare economy that was decimated. We're still working on that as well. But then we also had tragedies. We had the massacre in Buffalo. We talked about how we responded to that. We had to change legislation, but also start healing a community and work on gun safety, banning assault weapons for under 21. The red flag laws, we'll be giving another report at the end of this year on what our gun law changes have accomplished, building for the first time in our nation's history a 9-state consortium of neighboring states that are working on gun interdiction, and we've made a huge progress. We made huge progress there as well. Also had to take decisive action in response to a Supreme Court decision, 2 decisions, I should say. One that took away the ability of a governor to protect her citizens from people having concealed carry weapons, everything from subways to schools to synagogues to churches, public spaces. So we had to take action on that, as well as addressing the effects of the abortion decision overturning Roe v. Wade. But also, to wrap up a lot of our economic development efforts, we were able to land something that is historic. It's extraordinary to know that of all the states they're looking at, and they're looking very closely at a number and thought they were heading in a different direction, that Micron decided on New York and decided to invest $100 billion into our state over the next 20 years, creating over 50,000 indirect jobs, 9,000 direct, highly paid, good jobs, right smack dab in the middle of New York. And the ripple effect is phenomenal because I'm already hearing from companies that want to go into Batavia and want to go elsewhere, be part of the supply chain. So that all happened. We just sort of talked about that success, the largest investment in private sector investment, $100 billion, still incredible to comprehend the scale and the impact that this will have for generations. So we did talk about also some, what our team did together, how we're losing a few key individuals who helped us through the transition. Dr. Mary Bassett, an incredibly dedicated public servant who was the face of our response to COVID, and we had countless meetings and conversations and public events to reassure New Yorkers that we had what they needed, that we would make sure they had the test kits, that we'd have the vaccination clinics, we'd get the vaccines out there to everybody. So she was incredible. We had a chance to praise her this morning as well and thank her for her work and her return to public service and public service in Harvard. And Sheila Poole, our Office of Children and Family Services, again, long time public servant here. We talked about her talents and her contributions. Matt Driscoll, who had headed up most recently the Thruway Authority, had worked at DOT as well, leading 3 agencies over the last 3 decades. And Robert Mojica, thanked him for, again, holding on during our transition, getting us through our first budget, helping us prepare for the next, and really being a guiding light through our challenging times, because literally a year ago, when we were looking at our landscape, it was very bright. It was a bright day. We put together our budget. We had unprecedented revenues from tax receipts coming in from Wall Street. We had support from Washington. Revenues were up. It was a good budget to look at, a good landscape to look down. Literally 1 year later, and we saw this could happen. We wanted to be ready, and that's why we put aside a lot of money in reserves last year. But this year, it's a totally different story. People are making all kinds of predictions, talking about where our economy is going nationally, what that's going to do to us here in New York State. So I did want to, just because that's what's framing our budget negotiations, it'll frame our state of the state, what the landscape, the fiscal and economic landscape looks like for the state of New York as we head into the next year. So Robert, you'll be greatly missed, but I want to make sure you have a chance to tell us and continue to impart with us your knowledge and your insights as we think about the next year. So one last budget update for Robert Mojica.
Thank you, Governor. The budget we passed last year had a lot of investments and increased spending in order to spur economic growth as part of the recovery post-COVID. That budget is holding up well. Revenues are consistent with what we had provided for in the budget, and those revenues continue to be strong through the current fiscal year. However, the outlook, right, is extraordinarily challenging environment. We are seeing most consensus economic forecasters are predicting, depending on who you ask, somewhere between 50 and 80%, right, of an economic downturn, which is driven by the actions of the federal government. So it's nothing. New York is actually seeing extraordinarily low unemployment levels, and reaching pre-pandemic levels. But the actions by the Federal Reserve, as late as yesterday, right, another 0.5 point, right, they're very focused on controlling growth and very focused on the opposite of what we're trying to do, right? We're trying in the state to encourage growth, but they're trying to, in order to stamp down inflation, we're trying to control growth. What that will mean for revenues is still very uncertain, but any time that you are going to have a decrease in growth, it's going to impact New York, particularly in the financial sectors is what we're looking at. So we're seeing, right, in the financial sectors, again, very strong growth, but you're already seeing predictions of reductions in bonus growth, reductions potentially in employment levels. Again, we're not seeing them yet, but most of the forecasters are predicting that it's going to happen at some time. What we're hoping for is exactly what the Fed is trying to do as well, which is to have a soft landing, and that way we have an ability to recover quickly. The governor has positioned the budget in a very unique way where we have reserves that are there to dull the impact of any kind of a mild recession. But again, the growth figures that we had in last year's budget were based on growth into the out years. The Federal Reserve's actions obviously are contrary to that because their stated goal is to stamp out inflation, which is reducing growth, and that will impact the reserves. I mean, that will impact the receipts. So in our budget development process right now, right, those are the conversations that we're having, which is, right, making sure that a budget is created in a way that's reflecting the risks that the state is facing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and also to our Lieutenant Governor, I want to thank him for taking on the responsibilities midterm. He was thrust into a situation, but he has done a phenomenal job and is traveling the state, getting to know all the counties, all the beautiful communities that I had a chance to get to know as Lieutenant Governor. So he'll continue working in the economic development space as well. He'll make sure that he focuses on the regional economic development issues, as well as making sure that we focus on one other key area that's important to me. And I will talk about that in 1 second, but I want to thank him for stepping up and just being part of the team and being one of our great allies here. So we're looking ahead to the next 4 years and thinking about his roles, and one of them is really important to us, and that is the whole issue of the rise in hate crimes, and whether it's anti-Semitism or racism or the bigotry that exists out there, white supremacy, white supremacists, anti-Asian hate. So we've announced a unit that's going to be really charged with a lot of responsibilities. I'm tasking him with heading that up to be a convener, bring people together, but not just do listening, but also put together an action plan, and I want to thank him for doing that as well. So as we approach the, we talk about the past, we talk about where we are with the fiscal impacts and what we're heading into with Robert, but also, where are we heading for the next 4 years? And this is the challenge that we have before us. It's one I embrace. It's one I signed up for. It's one I sought. And I'm really proud to have this opportunity. And again, seeing that room full of cabinet leaders was really inspiring to know that whatever comes our way, we have the most talented people to handle it. And that gives me great confidence, whether it's a storm, whether it's what happens in our economy, whether it's dealing with the social issues that continue to rise up in unexpected ways sometimes, but we're ready, and that's the message. We are ready to handle it. So we're also not just going to rest on our laurels. We have big challenges, and I talked yesterday when I was in New York City working with Mayor Adams, and again, sometimes that gets a headline, governor working with mayor. Hopefully that becomes the norm, that people would, that no one is over surprised that because of the person I am and other leaders that I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and work with, we can get a lot more done. I think that's reassuring to people. They don't need to open up the news and see conflict all the time. They want to know that people are on the same team, and so they will know that about us if they have not learned that already. But part of that is working with Mayor Adams to make sure that we have sufficient housing. I raised this a couple weeks ago in a speech. This continues to be plaguing us in that we have people who do want to be here. They just can't afford it. They can't afford to grow up in the community they were raised in. They can't come from another state and launch a new tech company or small business. It's hard for them. And I don't want that to be a reason that we are held back. We get enough housing that people can afford and give that whole panoply of range of prices depending on their income. Then we're in a different place, and we've done a really miserable job over the last few decades compared to comparable cities and comparable states. And that can no longer be the case. This is New York. It's a problem, and we'll solve it. So I announced that we'll have a vision and a plan to achieve over 800,000 new housing units over the next decade. I look forward to sharing how that'll happen. You don't just say it and it happens. There's got to be policy changes and regulations changed, but we'll get it done. As I mentioned, the State of the State will be January 10th, so you can all put that on your calendars. But we have to embrace that issue as well as many, many others. But I'm excited. I'm excited to continue leading the state. I have the energy and the passion for this, and surrounded by the incredible team of leaders you see here, as well as those who run all their agencies. New York should know that the state is in very good hands right now. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well,
Are you calling?
I have a question about the budget that Robert just mentioned. Wondering what steps you're contemplating. Are you foreseeing cuts in spending, or at least slowing the rate of growth, or any tax increases that might have to happen?
Well, we're looking, I'll let Robert answer in more specificity all day. On the other hand, I'm going to put out there, just like last year, I will not be talking about what are we doing in the budget in negotiations. And I give you all the credit in the world, Karen. But I need to be able to have those conversations with the leaders. I mean, I have respect for the Assembly and the Senate in such a way that I want to make sure we're going to come forward with an approach that works for all of us. But I don't believe that raising taxes at a time we just cut taxes makes sense. We just had was it $1 or $2 billion tax cut, the property tax, cutting people's property taxes, putting money, or not cutting taxes, but putting property tax relief in the form of rebates back in their pockets, but also the middle class tax. We just did that a year ago. I'm not going to turn around and say, oh, that was last year, this year we're raising your taxes. So I don't foresee that. We also, are having conversation with our agencies, and Robert sends out this letter telling everybody to hold the line. We did have increases in areas that were desperate in need of attention: health care, child care, education. So those a lot of, and those are areas, some of the areas are just going to go up automatically. There's formulas in place that'll take them upward. $3 billion for education because of the decision to unlock foundation aid. That is a phenomenal amount of money. But some of these are going to be automatic. Our health care obligations under Medicaid, those are automatic once the global cap was raised. So those are areas we can't control in the budget in one sense. Those are already committed obligations that we're going to meet. But then there's all the agencies and how we manage those. So, Robert, is there anything you want to add to that?
I would just say the budget last year that was signed by the governor anticipated the likelihood that there could be an economic downturn within the next 24 months. So that's something that was built into the budget, and the governor made some decisions which were to fund recurring expenses, but also do one-time things. So we don't have built-in increases that would be unmanageable in the future. I think she said that at the end of the budget. We don't want to make sure, if we're making funding commitments today, right, that we can fund those tomorrow. And the budget was crafted in that way. So as of now, current revenues remain strong for the current year, right, to fulfill those commitments. And we have record reserves planned for the future going forward, right, to deal with some level of economic downturn if that's what happens.
And that's exactly, that's why we look back and say to the critics who last year thought we should spend all the money we had because we did have surplus, I said, you don't know what the future is going to bring. And that's based on many years of budgeting at local government level. And you have to have reserves. I inherited a situation where we had 4% reserves for our state. I was accustomed to budgeting with at least 15%. That's what the experts recommend. We will get to that 15%. If not this year, then next. We put aside a substantial amount to give us that cushion so we would not find if we had not been smart about this, and I had a lot of that money used for the one-time, for example, the bonuses for healthcare workers. We are hemorrhaging healthcare workers. We had to show appreciation for them and help them. Support for other initiatives were one time, the property tax. The reason that was one time was because we had the money then. I could not count on that being here this year, and it's not here this year. So we managed it well. As you look, looking back, sort of not Monday morning quarterbacking because it was a whole year ago, but we made decisions last year that we're really starting to benefit from now, and we're going to do the same for next year. My eye is always on not just this year, but also what we're going to find ourselves in next year. And I have to anticipate worst-case scenarios with respect to the economy. I just have to. And that's why we'll approach our budgeting with that frame.
Governor, on the healthcare issue, some hospital networks, big and small, have been raising concerns about their finances kind of in the wake of the pandemic. It's inflation, it's cost prices, and it's also workforce concerns. They're calling for additional state assistance next year. Have you had any of those conversations with them? And what do you think of the idea of state assistance to help out these networks?
We have been helping hospitals. And yes, we have more to do. But last year in our budget, and I'll have Robert address this, we did give substantial assistance to all levels of health care, but particularly our hospitals that lost revenues during the pandemic. Many of them lost revenues from elective surgeries when those were shut down. They're still reeling from that. Hospitals are still facing a severe shortage in workers, which unfortunately drives them to find these traveling nurses that one time during the pandemic, they came to New York State from other places. We're finding there's traveling nurses traveling from one county to another, being paid, I think the average person would consider very high rates, and the hospitals are getting slammed with those expenses. And the money from the federal government that was helping the hospitals has dried up now as well. So we know what they need. We're hearing from them constantly, and we're going to be able to help to a certain degree, but we also have to take a good look at all of our hospitals and say, you know, before you get this substantial amount of money, let's look at how you're managing your finances as well. I have no trouble looking under the hood at hospitals that are asking for substantial taxpayer assistance. Robert?
I think so. Last year, the governor put over $1 billion in and went to the hospital. It's still going out the door to the hospitals that needed it the most. We also increased rates across the board, Medicaid rates that had not been increased in many, many years. And we're working closely in following, the situation of the hospitals. As the governor mentioned, one of the biggest drivers for them is the cost of both workers and actually the healthcare workers, both of which the governor addressed in the budget, right, putting those $2 billion in bonus payments for healthcare workers to try to retain them, and also doing other things to help grow the healthcare workforce, which are the pinch points right now for the hospitals. COVID has happened, and the results of COVID are still being evaluated, and that is kind of what is impacting, right, the hospitals. So as part of budget making, we're discussing with the governor, right, these are things that we'll consider during the budget making process.
Governor, well, you passed legislation last year to implement free period products in homeless shelters. Have you been keeping track of this legislation, and how has it been going?
No, it's something we're proud of, a recognition that we have to have equity. And for many times, women have, higher costs to go through everyday life than men do. And the way we can make the playing field a little easier is to require that these products be available in places where they had not been before. So it's going well. We are continuing to check on it, make sure that people are complying with this. It's one thing to sign a bill into law, as we often do, but then I'm always saying, are people following it? And what is the enforcement here? So that's very important to me as well. But those are the kind of initiatives that we're proud of as we look for ways to make life a little bit easier for the women of the state.
Any changes that you'd be looking to update in the next session?
Not that I have in front of me right now, but certainly it's an area we're willing to take a close look at. Again, if there's an area where it's fallen down, been not as successful as we want, we'll be at the enforcement level. I don't know that it requires changes in legislation next year because it was pretty straightforward what is required. But if people aren't following that, I'm going to want to know.
Governor, next week the Assembly is holding a hearing on Lester Chang, the Assembly member-elect in Brooklyn, and whether or not he satisfies the residency requirement. Usually residency requirements are challenged in the courts. Do you have any problem with the way the Assembly is going about that, given that Mr. Chang won the election in November?
Well, it's a complicated area because people have to follow the requirements to run for office, and one of them is residency. So the fact that the legislature wants to make sure that everything is proper and ask that question before they seat him is certainly their prerogative. I'll just leave it at that. That's their prerogative to deal with that.
And then also yesterday, the new New York panel, they put out their report. You highlighted it. When it comes to the MTA, they say the governor, the state legislature, and local government entities throughout New York State should commit to working together to develop a sustainable operating budget model for the MTA. I'm curious what you think of that. Should that apply to governments throughout the state? I mean, what are you thinking of as you think of a sustainable operating
Well,
model?
there's many governments outside, New York City proper that benefit from the MTA. So I think we're talking about the individuals, those governments, but also when they talk about the impact on people across the state to support the MTA, that's basically saying that if there's state dollars, these are state dollars. They're not generated by businesses or individuals within the commuting range who benefit from this. We're talking about state dollars from people who will never take the MTA. And that is what you're wrestling with right now, as you talk about putting the MTA on a path toward long-term sustainability, but not just to continue, but also has to be kept clean. It has to be safe. It has to be modernized. So those are additional investments, as well as making sure that it's on time. And I just I sat down, I think yesterday, and looked at our numbers. And our on-time numbers, one of those quality of life issues. You remember the summer of hell, those who reflect on the summer of 2017 when it was forever. You look at your watches, the train never going to come. We know how bad it can get And we want to continue reassuring commuters that it'll never get that bad under my watch. We'll make sure that we're continuing to make the investments we need. So you have to look at the short term, what'll get people back taking the subways, what's missing. Public safety is key to that. And that is why when I went to event with the mayor in October, we talked about how the state can help bring in more police officers, how we can bring in cameras, and we're doing very well increasing the number of trains that have cameras for security on them. I just checked on those numbers again yesterday, as well as care for individuals who need to get mental health services and not be on the train. So we have to create an environment where in the short term people feel better about taking the subway or the trains. That'll increase our revenues. We've plateaued right now at about 3.9 million riders. It's still historically high since the pandemic, but we're still lower than we should be. So short term, get more riders on, make it a good experience. They want to go on, overcome their fears. But long term, we have to have the resources to invest, and that's what we're talking about, is making sure that we have a capital program that allows us to continue the expansion. So I'm not going to answer the question here, as you can tell. I'm not going to tell you the formula that we're deriving, that we're coming up with, but it's going to be from them finding cost-saving measures within the MTA. That's what we've talked about. And what is the responsibility of people who live and benefit from it in that area, as well as the businesses, as well as what the rest of the state may or may not be doing. So, Robert, did I mangle that up enough? It's a complicated area, but we have to get it right. We have no choice.
The MTA has many funding streams, right? Presently has many funding streams, right? We have to evaluate the estimates for those funding streams even now, right? And as they go forward, as the governor mentioned, the ridership numbers are estimates. So we're evaluating all of those things, right? And looking at their out-year gaps, because this is not a one-year thing, it's a multiple-year thing. There are a lot of estimates in those numbers. So we're looking at all of them. I think the recognition in our report was the priority that the MTA needs for the region and the state.
Governor, I know you don't want to negotiate with the press or discuss these things.
So
with the
stop
press,
right
but
there.
On housing, since you talked about how big of an issue it'll be at your State of the State, good cause eviction did not move through the session last year. Progressives are very vocal about that being a big piece of what they're looking for this year. Do you believe that there should be further rights for tenants when crafting your new housing policy? Is good cause a part of that conversation?
We're going to be having conversations with everyone affected by this, and it's a broad group of people. But we always will listen. We'll always hear people's concerns and address them in a way that fits into the larger story of us having to be able to build the housing, create the housing, create housing from conversions. Transit-oriented development will be part of it. I'll tell you that right now. That's important to me. I've seen incredibly successful examples of communities that have had this asset, a train station that we've now modernized. We've now sped up the trains. We've now had more tracks to, and there's parking lots all around it. Like, why aren't there people living there? Isn't that what success and smart planning looks like? So we have so much as part of this, but we'll certainly be listening to the advocates as we head into the process as well.
Love to know if, I think with the special session that's being floated about the potential pay increase for lawmakers, you said that you would support that. Is there anything else that, I mean, if lawmakers come back to Albany that you are hoping that they address, or that you would, in order for you to sign that, would anything else need to be passed or to be discussed? I also would love to know, do you plan to sign the wrongful death law or the Grieving Families Act, and what's your plans with that, and why or why not?
With respect to the chatter that's about, because that's all it is, we've not been told the legislature is coming back. We've not been shown a proposal from them, so that is right now a hypothetical in my mind as to even whether or not there's going to be a session. So we've not put together other issues we would want to talk about. I guarantee the nature is that it'll be a very short session. So this may or may not be the place to bring in larger issues, so that is to be determined. Wrongful deaths, that goes in the category of we're still reviewing the bills. I have a few more weeks, and I have countless hours budgeted to review, but to the chagrin of my staff, I insist upon reading all 1,009 bills. That's a record amount. The average is about 600 or 700 bills, and in comparison, Congress that meets for 2 straight years, usually finishes up with about 200 bills, so we have a lot. That is one of them, and I'm gathering a lot of information from different points of view, which is why it takes a long time, because I'm always saying, as I review this, what is this group saying? What is the impact on our state? What does this do to our finances? So I pressure test everything I sign or everything I veto. There's been a lot of analysis that goes behind it, so there are some difficult bills that are before us right now, and we're looking at all of them very carefully.
I know you said that, thank you, that it's proposed, or maybe, I mean, we don't know if the special session, if this will happen, but one of the things that has been maybe discussed is about a ban or cap on outside income. What are your thoughts on that? Would you support that?
That seems to be, if you're having a pay increase, that would be something that I would think in the interest of transparency and accountability that people would expect. All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Do you have enough snowplow truck drivers? Are you guys set with that? Are you still looking for more?
Are you volunteering?
I drive.
Yeah. I've actually gone on a run with a woman, it's just the two of us, and it was quite the experience, but let me have our snow dream team respond to that. Commissioner, starting with you.
The short answer is yes. We're recruiting, we're always recruiting to get more CDL drivers in. And as you've seen through our VMS messaging across the state, we're doing more and more to bring folks in to join our ranks at DOT. And thanks to the governor's efforts, we've got a very good path forward to help us do that. But the bottom line is that we're prepared for this storm, and we're shifting assets accordingly. And we've got enough plow drivers and plows to make it all happen.
Okay. All right, be safe out there, but it's going to get bad.